Hey guys, how you doing? It's Tom. So the IG report has been released, and former FBI Director James Comey has been absolved of acting with any political bias. Now, I always get a good chuckle when powerful people, usually politically connected, are given the benefit of the doubt, that we could ignore their actions and assume they operated with just the best of intentions. I mean, when do you ever hear a politician or the media say, well, you know what, yeah, that man, he robbed a liquor store, he walked in with a gun, pointed that gun at the cashier and said, give me all of your money. But we could ignore those actions because the man who robbed the store, he actually has a starving young child at home, which might be the case, but the point is that you would never hear them say that. They would judge this person by their actions. So, me, I prefer to judge people by their actions, especially people in positions of immense power, like the director of the FBI. So let's talk about the actions of the FBI, and let's talk about the actions of former FBI Director James Comey. Now, we all know that James Comey absolved Hillary Clinton of wrongdoing in the email scandal in spite a laundry list of things that she did wrong. And ironically, she was given this same courtesy. Basically, Comey said, yeah, she took all of these illegal actions, but her intentions weren't bad. She was just ignorant, so don't worry about it. Again, would the man who robbed the liquor store be given the same benefit of the doubt? But if that's not bad enough, we later found out that James Comey actually wrote the letter absolving Hillary Clinton of wrongdoing before the investigation was completed. Now, if that's not the definition of political bias, making a decision before an investigation even takes place, well, how would you define political bias? But that's not the only thing that was wrong with the handling of the Clinton email situation. We also later found out that the language in the letter that absolved Hillary Clinton was changed from grossly negligent to extremely careless. Now, that's very important, and it might not sound important to me or you, but from a legal perspective, grossly negligent can get you in a lot of trouble. But extremely careless, well, that can be written off as, well, maybe this person should have just paid a little bit more attention. Again, that sounds like some serious political bias to me. And of course we know that Hillary Clinton was behind the funding, and the Clinton campaign was behind the funding of the now infamous PP dossier, where a former British agent was paid money to create a fake dossier on President Trump, and basically the dossier came back with President Trump, something along the lines of, likes to get pissed on by hookers or piss on hookers in Russian hotels. So Clinton pays for this dossier, and it gets funneled through John McCain and eventually gets to James Comey and the FBI. And that dossier is brought in front of America's FISA court. Now, this is the secret court in which basically they rubber stamp the government to, well, unconstitutionally spy on whoever they want. But in this case, it was on Donald Trump. Now, keep in mind, when Donald Trump Jr. met with a Russian attorney, he was later criticized by the FBI, and they said, you know, anytime a foreign person from another country contacts you and says, we have information of a political nature against your political opponent, well, you should instantly let the FBI know. Well, that's very interesting because James Comey was well aware that the PP dossier was funded by Hillary Clinton, in which she paid a foreign agent to dig up dirt. Now, is James Comey saying that it's okay to pay foreign agents to dig up political dirt on political opponents, but it's not okay to take a meeting with a foreign agent if they say they have dirt on your political opponent? Well, both things can't be true, so it sure looks like James Comey and everyone who signed that FISA warrant, Rod Rosenstein, Andrew McCabe, were all acting with extreme political bias when they brought that dossier in front of the FISA court and didn't inform the judge that the dossier was funded by the Clinton campaign, in which she paid a foreign agent to get that information, and that the way the dossier was put together, there's a great chance that it was fabricated, which, as we know now, it was. That sounds like some pretty serious political bias to me. Speaking of Andrew McCabe, who signed the FISA warrants, we know that while his wife was running for office, her campaign received loads of money from the Clinton campaign. Now, I don't know about you, but having your wife receive loads of money from a person you're integral in investigating, well, that might create some political bias, not to mention the clear violation of the law under the Hatch Act. Clear political bias. And of course, all of these people, among many others, were involved in the Uranium One investigation. The FBI was involved in the Uranium One investigation, where they openly discovered, dead to right, that Russians had bribed off truck companies, bribed off Americans within the government in order to get special favor, which ultimately helped them in the securing of 1/8 of Americans' uranium supply, and that the Clinton Foundation had received tens of millions of dollars from Canadian businessman Frank Giestra, who was integral in the securing of Uranium One and 1/8 of America's uranium supply to be sold to Russia. And do you know who dropped that uranium off to Russia? Do you know who brought them the briefcase filled with uranium? Well, that was Robert Mueller, the person currently in charge of investigating Trump for Russian collusion. Man, that sure seems like a lot of political bias. We also know that James Comey, upon being fired by President Trump, leaked out classified information in which he basically stated in the classified information that President Trump had tried to intimidate him, to threaten him that he better not investigate Trump for Russian collusion. But of course, Trump called out his bluff, and he tweeted, "Well, James Comey, you better hope I don't release the videotape." And then Comey thought, oh shit, Trump has a videotape, I was caught dead to right lying. And when he was forced to testify in front of Congress, he completely changed his story from the classified memo that he had previously released. Turns out, Trump didn't have a videotape, he just knew Comey was full of shit, and he called his bluff. Well, doing that sure seems like a lot of political bias. And of course, because James Comey brought the FISA warrant, the fake PP-Gate dossier warrant, to the FISA court, well, he was well aware that the Trump campaign had all of their electrical communications wiretapped, and that the FBI had actually infiltrated a spy into the Trump campaign. Yet, in spite of all of that, the FBI allowed the public to believe that Trump was colluding with Russia. Now, if he was, and you had a spy, and you had a spy in his campaign and all of his electrical communications, well, you would have dead-to-right evidence that he did in fact collude with Russia. So James Comey knew that Trump didn't collude with Russia, yet not only did he let the public think that, but he didn't, or did he, bring this to the attention of Robert Mueller. Again, he has his own bias now, doesn't he? And they have gone forward with a witch hunt, tens of millions of dollars of taxpayer money, fraudulent investigation into Trump-Russia collusion. If that's not political bias, I sure don't know what is. And then, of course, we have Peter Strzok. Now, he was an FBI agent who was absolutely integral into both the Clinton email investigation and the Trump-Russia collusion investigation, fraudulent investigation. As it turns out, we now know that Peter Strzok was responsible for changing the language in the email probe in the final conclusion from grossly negligent to extremely careless. It also has been exposed that the reason General Flynn was taken down or arrested for lying to the FBI is that Peter Strzok claimed in a he said she said situation that Flynn had changed his testimony. And since there was no recording of this, if you lie to the FBI, you're automatically found guilty, because apparently the FBI, in spite of all this, their word is worth more than a decorated American general or any citizen of the United States of America. So Flynn's word versus Strzok's word, and Flynn's life was destroyed. But we then found out that Peter Strzok had been involved in an affair with Lisa Page at the department, a lawyer at the Department of Justice, or the FBI, I forget where she's a lawyer, but the point is, he was involved in an affair with her. And they had all types of interesting text messages where they talked about being part of a secret society, talked about having a secret plan to prevent Trump from becoming president. And when Lisa Page asked Peter Strzok, will Trump become president? Strzok replied, we, meaning the FBI, will stop him. Well, if that's not political bias, I really would like to know how you define political bias. And then we have another agent at the FBI whose text messages have been discovered, who wrote, Trump supporters are all poor to middle class, uneducated, lazy pieces of shit that think he will magically grant them jobs for doing nothing. That sounds pretty biased to me. By the way, doesn't that remind you of when President Obama said, how is Trump going to get GDP above 3%? How is he going to fix the economy? Does he have a magic wand? Well, it turns out Trump did have a magic wand, and that Trump supporters actually understood what he was saying. So maybe Trump supporters aren't all poor to middle class, uneducated. Well, maybe they are uneducated, but the modern education system is actually a liberal indoctrination, a socialist indoctrination system. So maybe it's better to be uneducated because you could just use logic. So it turns out they're not that. Maybe Trump supporters aren't lazy pieces of shit. Maybe they just, I don't know, have brains. So, by the way, interesting to call people who don't want the welfare state lazy pieces of shit. Just an observation. Because it seems that Trump supporters were right and that FBI agent and Obama were wrong because, well, have you seen the economy lately? I mean, Trump came in and he cut taxes and he cut regulations. And now unemployment is at its lowest rate since the lowest it's been since the 1960s. And African American unemployment and Hispanic unemployment are the lowest they've ever been. And there are more women working right now than any time in American history. And it's not just that more people are working. The average salary for people in non-managerial positions has actually gone up 3%. So more people have jobs and people are making more money. Maybe Trump supporters aren't all that uneducated. Then, of course, we heard it's going to take years to defeat ISIS, right? I mean, Obama, he had 8 years and all ISIS did was get bigger and stronger. Yet Trump takes office and within 6 months we find out, oh, ISIS no longer has any territory left. Pretty good call for some very uneducated people. And then we were told, you know, North Korea could never be solved because Kim Jong-un is crazy and he's just this lunatic who's probably gonna nuke us all and end the world. And then Trump carries out his foreign policy of speak loudly and carry a big stick, along with his good cop, bad cop act. And he says, listen, I could give you hell, and I could bomb you, and we could send SEAL Team 6 after you, and you could get a bullet in your head. Or, if you want to go the other route, we could normalize economic relations, end the Korean War, you could give up our prisoners, and everything will be great for North Korea, everything will be great for America. And just like that, the greatest threat to cause nuclear war in the world has become an American ally. And the policy that has led to 70 years of people in North Korea being victims of egregious human rights violations, so clearly that policy hasn't worked. Well, now we're trying something different to see if we could expose the people of North Korea to the West, and if we could incentivize Kim Jong-un to not commit human rights violations because it's in his economic interest, well then maybe we could actually better the situation for the people in North Korea. Well, that's pretty smart for some uneducated Trump supporters, now isn't it? And of course we have the exposing of the deep state and everything I just outlined because, well, if Hillary Clinton had won, well, wasn't all the political bias in favor of her? And doesn't that mean that all of the corrupt deep state agents were working with her? And if they're corrupt, well, she was probably corrupt. And wow, that's a pretty good call, not electing the corrupt person. And then of course, we have Trump actually doing what he said he would do, which is very rare for a politician. The defunding of Planned Parenthood, you might not agree with it, but he said he would do it. The moving of the American embassy to Jerusalem, again, you might not agree with it, but at least he's doing what he said he would do. He passed right to try legislation, or he signed it, so now people with terminal illnesses can try experimental treatments and they might not die, breaking up the monopoly that Big Pharma had. The borders are controlled. Again, you might not agree with it, but Trump doing what he said he would do. He pulled out of the Paris Climate Agreement, just like he said he would do. He killed the TPP, just like he said he would do. He's renegotiating NAFTA, calling Canada out for what he describes as unfair tariff practices. And he's even got China to agree to buy billions of dollars of American products. Well, that's a pretty good call for a bunch of poor to middle class, uneducated, lazy piece of shit Trump supporters who thought that Trump would magically grant them jobs for doing nothing.